My wife used to cry at sunrises until called her manipulative for sobbing during our fight, so I signed everything she wanted. That was 6 months ago. She's pregnant in Portland, while I still sleep on her side of the bed, holding the journal where she wrote, "I feel like I'm disappearing," 47 times. My wife is extremely sensitive. A sad commercial, crying, reading a novel, crying, sharing even a slightly sad story, crying. I've tried not to have a problem with this as I know that's just her nature, but it can be overwhelming sometimes, and embarrasses me in front of my friends when my wife cries. About 3 months ago, we happened to get into a huge fight. She was telling a story to some friends, and exaggerating the story quite a bit, so I just said, "Hey, I think you're lying a bit here. That didn't happen like that." I wasn't trying to take away from the story, but I hate liars, and she does it a fair bit when storytelling. She told me that she just does it for comedic effect, and that everyone knows she doesn't tell stories 100% accurately. It was still bothering me, however, after everyone went home, and I brought it up again, to which she told me that we'd already talked about it, and she didn't need me to correct her in front of her friends. We essentially got into a fight, and I raised my voice. She immediately started crying, more like sobbing, and I told her that she was being a manipulative piece of crap doing that. I told her that I was sick and tired of her emotions, and how annoying her crying was. I told her that every time I bring up something to take as a critique, she begins crying, and it's a manipulative way to get me to stop talking about whatever's bothering me. I told her about the time I called her food disgusting, and started explaining how I would cook it to taste well, and she started crying. I then threatened to lay hands on her if she didn't stop her manipulative cries. Not proud of that, but in my defense, I didn't mean it. It was in the heat of the moment. My mom did the same thing to my dad, and I hate when women do that. She asked me through shuddering breathing if I thought she was manipulative, and I said yes. She flinched when I raised my hand right after, and I assured her I wouldn't hurt her, and that was just an empty threat. However, then I told her that she always manipulates the argument into going her way by crying and being the victim. She told me she couldn't even look at me and locked herself into our room to calm down. She came out a few hours later and told me that she was sorry if I thought she was being manipulative and that it wouldn't happen again. Problem solved, right? Except it's not at all. I didn't notice it immediately, but she started pulling away from me. She won't watch movies with me if there's any sad parts. She doesn't tell me the stories she used to. She won't tell stories to friends when I'm around, and now our friends don't want me to go out when they do, because they say she's not fun when I'm there. She stopped reading books in the living room, stopped watching unpredictable TV shows. She won't even talk to her mom on the phone when I'm in the room. I feel like I'm living with a ghost now. It wasn't until yesterday that I even realized I haven't seen her cry since our fight. I brought it up last night, and she told me that she didn't want to manipulate me anymore. I told her that her everyday crying wasn't manipulative, and she said, "So it's only manipulative when you're mad at me." I sat there staring at her, my mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She turned away from me and walked to the kitchen, pulling out ingredients for dinner. Her movements were mechanical, precise. She chopped vegetables with steady hands, while I remained frozen on the couch. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I watched her work, noticing how she kept her face turned away from me. When she accidentally cut her finger on the knife, she quickly wrapped it in a paper towel without making a sound. The old Sarah would have cried out, maybe even teared up a little. This Sarah just continued cooking like nothing happened. I got up and approached her. "Let me see your finger." She held it out without looking at me. The cut was deeper than I thought, blood seeping through the paper towel. I grabbed the first aid kit from under the sink and started cleaning the wound. She didn't flinch when I applied the antiseptic, didn't make any sound at all. "This might need stitches," I said. "It's fine," she replied flatly. I wrapped the bandage around her finger, trying to catch her eye. She kept her gaze fixed on the wall behind me. When I finished, she went back to cooking one-handed. That night at dinner, we ate in complete silence. She pushed food around her plate, taking small bites. I tried to start conversations about work, about the weather, about anything. She gave one-word answers or just nodded. After dinner, she cleaned up while I sat at the table, watching her. When she finished, she went straight to our bedroom. I heard the shower running, then the hairdryer. By the time I came to bed, she was already under the covers, facing away from me. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing. It was too even, too controlled. She was awake, pretending to sleep. I reached out to touch her shoulder, but she shifted away slightly. The message was clear. The next morning, I woke to an empty bed. Sarah was already in the kitchen, making breakfast. She'd set out my coffee and toast, just the way I liked it. When I thanked her, she just nodded and continued eating her cereal. "I have to work late tonight," I said. "Okay, maybe we could do something this weekend? Go to that new restaurant downtown, if you want." Her responses were polite but empty. It was like talking to a customer service representative, not my wife. I left for work feeling unsettled. At the office, I couldn't concentrate. My coworker Ben noticed me staring at my computer screen without typing anything. "Everything all right, Mark?" he asked. I almost told him everything but stopped myself. How could I explain that I'd broken something in my marriage and didn't know how to fix it? "Just tired," I said. That evening, I came home to find Sarah's friend Linda leaving our apartment. Linda gave me a cold look as she passed me in the hallway. Inside, Sarah was sitting on the couch, her phone in her hand. "What did Linda want?" I asked. "Just visiting." I noticed her eyes were slightly red. "Were you crying?" She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. No, but I knew she was lying. She'd been crying with Linda, sharing whatever emotions she couldn't show me anymore. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Over the next few weeks, the pattern continued. Sarah functioned like a robot around me. She cooked, cleaned, went to work, came home, but there was no life in her actions, no spark in her eyes when she looked at me. If she looked at me at all, I started noticing things I'd missed before, how she'd excuse herself to the bathroom when we watched TV, returning with perfectly composed features, how she'd end phone calls with her sister the moment I entered the room, how she'd close her book and leave when I sat down near her. One Saturday, I suggested we visit her parents. She agreed without enthusiasm. During the drive, she stared out the window, answering my attempts at conversation with minimal responses. At her parents' house, I watched her transform. The moment her mother opened the door, Sarah's face lit up. She hugged her mom tightly, chatted animatedly about work, laughed at her father's jokes. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion. But when her mother asked about us, about how things were going, Sarah's smile became fixed. "Everything's fine," she said, glancing at me. "Mark's been working hard." Her mother looked between us, concern flickering in her eyes. She'd noticed the distance, the careful way Sarah held herself when I was near, but she didn't push. On the drive home, Sarah returned to her silent state. I gripped the steering wheel, frustration building in my chest. "You were different there," I said, "with your parents. You were yourself." She didn't respond. "Sarah, please, talk to me. What would you like me to say?" Her voice was calm, measured. "I want you to be yourself, like you were with your parents." She turned to look at me then, really look at me. "You told me that myself was manipulative." The words hung in the air between us. I tried to formulate a response, but everything sounded hollow in my head. That night, I found her wedding ring on the bathroom counter. She'd taken it off to shower and hadn't put it back on. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm. Such a small thing, but its absence from her finger felt enormous. I brought it to her in the bedroom. "You forgot this." She looked at the ring, then at me. I didn't forget. My chest tightened. "What does that mean?" She took the ring from my hand and placed it on her nightstand. I just needed a break from wearing it. I wanted to argue, to demand she put it back on, but the words died in my throat. What right did I have to demand anything from her? The next day was Sunday. I woke to find Sarah already gone. A note on the kitchen counter said she'd gone to church with Linda. She used to invite me to go with her, but I'd always declined. Now she didn't even ask. I spent the morning alone in our apartment, surrounded by reminders of our life together. Photos from our wedding, our honeymoon, various trips and celebrations. In every picture, Sarah was smiling, often with tears of joy in her eyes. I'd found those tears endearing then. When had they become annoying to me? I thought about my parents' marriage. My mother had been volatile, prone to dramatic crying fits that sent my father scrambling to appease her. I'd watched him give in again and again, watched her use her tears like a weapon. I'd sworn I'd never let a woman do that to me. But Sarah wasn't my mother. Her tears had never been calculated or manipulative. They were just her pure emotion, honestly expressed, and I'd made her feel ashamed of that. When Sarah returned from church, she seemed lighter somehow. She hummed while making lunch, a sound I hadn't heard in months, but when she noticed me watching, the humming stopped. "How was church?" I asked. "Good. Pastor Williams gave a sermon about forgiveness." "That's nice." She nodded and went back to cooking. I wanted to ask if she could forgive me, but the words wouldn't come. That afternoon, Sarah's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. She answered, stepping into the bedroom. I could hear her muffled voice through the door, the tone urgent and worried. She emerged a few minutes later, her face carefully composed. "I need to go to the hospital. My grandmother had a fall. I'll drive you," I offered. "No, it's okay. Linda's picking me up." "Sarah, I'm your husband. Let me be there for you." She paused at the door, not turning around. "I need to be able to react honestly to this, Mark. I can't do that with you there." The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood in our empty apartment, her words echoing in my mind. She couldn't be honest with me. She couldn't be herself with me. I'd turned our marriage into a performance where she had to hide her true feelings. I sat on the couch, the same spot where our fight had happened months ago. I could still see her face when I'd raised my hand, the way she'd flinched. I'd become someone she feared, someone she had to protect herself from. My phone buzzed, a text from our friend Chris. "Hey man, we're having a game night Friday. You coming?" I started to type yes, then hesitated. These were the same friends who'd stopped inviting me to things because Sarah wasn't fun when I was around. I deleted my response and set the phone aside. Hours passed. The apartment grew dark, but I didn't turn on the lights. I sat there thinking about every time I'd criticized Sarah's emotions, every time I'd made her feel bad for being herself. I remembered early in our relationship how I'd been drawn to her empathy, her open heart. She cried at our wedding, overwhelmed with happiness. She cried when we adopted our cat, when she got promoted at work, when her best friend had a baby. And yes, she cried when she was sad or hurt too. It was all part of who she was. When had I started seeing it as a flaw instead of a feature? My phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Hello? My grandmother's okay," she said, her voice thick. She'd been crying. "Just a broken hip. She'll need surgery, but she'll recover. I'm glad she's okay. Are you coming home?" A pause. "In a bit. Linda and I are going to grab something to eat first." "Okay. I love you, Sarah." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'll see you later, Mark." She hung up without saying it back. I couldn't blame her. I finally turned on the lights and looked around our apartment. Everything was perfectly clean, perfectly organized. Sarah had always been tidy, but lately, she'd been almost obsessive about it, like she was trying to control the one thing she could. I went to our bedroom and opened her nightstand drawer. looking for, I didn't know what. Evidence of the person she used to be, maybe. Inside, I found a small notebook. I knew I shouldn't read it, but I opened it anyway. It was a journal, started just after our fight. The first entry was short. Mark says I'm manipulative when I cry. I never meant to be. I just feel things deeply. But if it hurts him, I'll stop. I have to stop. I flipped through more pages, each entry a testament to her struggle. Watched a video about a soldier coming home to his dog today. Almost cried at my desk. Had to go to the bathroom until it passed. Mom called about Grandpa's test results. Told her I'd call her back when Mark left for work. Can't let him see me upset. Linda asked why I seemed different. Couldn't explain. Started to cry. Thank God Mark wasn't home. The most recent entry was from yesterday. Mark noticed I haven't cried. Tried to tell me it wasn't all manipulative. But how do I know which tears are okay and which aren't? Safer to show none. I feel like I'm disappearing. Maybe that's what he wanted all along. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. I'd done this. I'd taken a woman who felt everything and made her afraid to feel anything, at least around me. I put the journal back carefully, my chest constricting with each breath. The apartment felt suffocating, every corner holding memories of the woman Sarah used to be. I wandered into the living room, where her bookshelf stood against the wall. The romance novels she loved were gone, replaced by cookbooks and home organization guides, practical things, safe things that wouldn't make her cry. The front door opened quietly. Sarah entered, her movements careful and controlled. She glanced at me briefly before heading to the kitchen. "How's your grandmother?" I asked, following her. "She's resting. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning." Her voice remained steady, emotionless. "I should come with you to the hospital." She pulled leftovers from the refrigerator, arranging them on plates. "That's not necessary. Sarah, she's family. My family too." Her hands stilled for a moment before resuming their task. Linda already said she'd go with me. The microwave hummed as our dinner reheated. I watched her move through our kitchen with practiced efficiency, every action deliberate and contained. When the food was ready, she set our plates on the table and sat down, focusing intently on her meal. "Your mom called earlier," I said. "I told her you'd call back." Sarah nodded, cutting her chicken into precise squares. "I'll call her tomorrow." She sounded worried, said you haven't been yourself lately. A slight tension appeared in her shoulders. "I'll handle it." We finished eating in silence. Sarah cleared the table, washed the dishes, wiped down the counters. Her nightly routine, performed without variation. When she finished, she moved toward the bedroom. "Wait," I said. "Can we talk?" She paused in the doorway, not turning around. "About what?" "About us. About what's happening to our marriage." "Nothing's happening. Everything's fine. You know that's not true." She turned then, her face a mask of calm. "What would you like me to say, Mark? That I'm happy? That everything's perfect? Would that make you feel better? I want you to be honest with me." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, so quiet I almost missed it. "Honest, right." She disappeared into the bedroom. I heard drawers opening and closing, the rustle of clothing. When I entered a few minutes later, she was already in bed, facing the wall. The next morning, Sarah left early for the hospital. I called in sick to work, unable to face another day of pretending everything was normal. Instead, I drove to my brother's house across town. Ben answered the door in sweatpants, surprised to see me. "Mark, what are you doing here? Can I come in?" He stepped aside, studying my face. "You look like hell. What's going on?" We sat in his living room, and I found myself spilling everything. The fight, the threat, Sarah's transformation. Ben listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned with each detail. "You threatened to hit her?" he asked when I finished. "I didn't mean it. It was just what? Just like Dad used to do to Mom?" The comparison stung. "That's different. Mom was actually manipulative. Was she? Or was that just what Dad told us?" I stared at him, memories shifting and realigning. Our mother crying, our father's anger, the way she'd learned to hide her emotions, just like Sarah was doing now. "Oh God," I whispered. "What have I done?" Ben leaned forward. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I left his house with more questions than answers. On the drive home, I passed a flower shop and impulsively stopped. Sarah loved flowers, especially sunflowers. I bought a large bouquet, remembering how she used to cry happy tears whenever I surprised her with them. But when I got home, Sarah wasn't there. A text on my phone said she was staying at the hospital with her grandmother. I put the flowers in a vase on the kitchen table and waited. She didn't come home that night, or the next. Her texts were brief, clinical updates about her grandmother's condition. I offered again to visit, to bring her food, anything. She declined each time. On the third day, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove to the hospital, finding Sarah in the waiting room with Linda. They were talking quietly, Sarah's hand pressed to her mouth. When she saw me, her expression shuddered. "What are you doing here?" Linda asked, her tone hostile. "I came to see how Sarah's grandmother is doing, and to be with my wife." Sarah stood, smoothing her clothes. "She's sleeping. The surgery went well." "That's good. Can we talk? Privately?" Linda started to protest, but Sarah touched her arm. "It's okay. I'll be right back." We found an empty corner of the hospital cafeteria. Sarah sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap. "I bought you flowers," I said. "Sunflowers. They're at home. Thank you." "Sarah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I said, for how I've made you feel." She looked at me with tired eyes. "Which part are you sorry for? Calling me manipulative? Threatening to hit me? Or making me feel like my emotions are something to be ashamed of?" Each word landed like a blow. All of it. Everything. I was wrong. "Yes, you were. I want to fix this. Tell me how to fix this." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if you can. You showed me who you really are, Mark. You showed me what you really think of me. That's not who I am." I was angry. I wasn't thinking, but you were thinking. You'd been thinking it for a while, hadn't you? Every time I cried, you were judging me, comparing me to your mother, building up this resentment. I couldn't deny it. I was wrong. My mother, my father, their relationship. I let it poison how I see things. But you're not her, Sarah. Your emotions aren't weapons. They're just you. I know that. I've always known that. But you made me feel like being me was wrong. Like I had to choose between being myself and being your wife. You don't. You don't have to choose. She stood up. I already did. I watched her walk back to Linda, my heart sinking. Over the following days, Sarah continued to stay at the hospital or with Linda. Our apartment felt like a museum, preserved exactly as she'd left it. The sunflowers wilted in their vase, petals dropping one by one. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Powell, who specialized in anger management and relationship issues. In our first session, I told her everything. You recognize that what you did was abusive, she said. It wasn't a question. I never hit her. Physical violence isn't the only form of abuse. You threatened violence. You used her emotional nature against her. You made her feel unsafe in her own home. The word abuse sat heavy in my stomach. I'm not an abuser, but you engaged in abusive behavior. The first step is acknowledging that. I left that session feeling worse than when I'd arrived, but I went back the next week and the next. Slowly, painfully, I began to understand the depth of damage I'd caused. Sarah finally came home after 2 weeks. She moved through the apartment like a stranger, gathering clothes and toiletries. I watched from the doorway as she packed a suitcase. Where are you going? Linda's. Just for a while. How long is a while? She zipped the suitcase closed. I don't know. Sarah, please. I'm seeing a therapist. I'm working on myself. I know I hurt you, but we can get through this. She pulled the suitcase off the bed, wheels hitting the floor with a thud. I'm glad you're getting help, but I need space to figure out what I want. What about what we want? We're married, Sarah. We're supposed to work through things together. She stopped at the bedroom door, not looking back. We were supposed to do a lot of things. You were supposed to love me for who I am. I was supposed to feel safe with you. Things change. After she left, I found myself in our bedroom, staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been. The closet door stood open, revealing gaps where her clothes had hung. Her nightstand was cleared of the books she'd been reading, the hand lotion she applied every night, the glass of water she always kept there. I sat on her side of the bed, running my hand over the pillow that still smelled like her shampoo. 3 months ago, I'd wanted her to stop crying. Now I'd give anything to see her show any emotion at all, even sadness. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone rang. It was Chris again, asking about game night. This time I agreed to go, desperate for any distraction from the empty apartment. But when I arrived at his house, the atmosphere was tense. Our mutual friends were there, but conversation stilted when I entered. How's Sarah? Jessica asked carefully. She's staying with Linda for a bit, giving us some space. The room fell silent. Everyone knew something was wrong, but no one wanted to address it directly. We played cards half-heartedly, the usual jokes and banter replaced by forced politeness. During a break, I overheard Jessica and her husband in the kitchen. She was like a completely different person, Jessica whispered, like all the life had been sucked out of her. Linda says it's been going on for months, ever since that fight. What kind of fight makes someone stop being themselves entirely? I left early, unable to bear their speculation. At home, I found myself drawn to Sarah's journal again. I knew I shouldn't read it, but I needed to understand what she'd been going through. The entries after I'd last read were even more heartbreaking. Saw a puppy at the park today, a golden retriever, just like the one I had growing up. Almost cried but managed to hold it in. A woman asked if I was okay. I said yes, I'm getting good at lying. Watched the sunrise from the bedroom window. It was beautiful. Felt tears building up but pushed them down. Mark can't see me being manipulative about a sunrise. Linda hugged me today, and I broke down completely. Thank God Mark was at work. She says this isn't healthy, that I'm disappearing. But isn't that what he wants? For the emotional parts of me to disappear? I used to love feeling things deeply. It made life richer, more meaningful. Now I feel like I'm watching life through frosted glass. Everything muted, distant, safe. Mark brought home flowers today. Sunflowers. I wanted to cry. From sadness or happiness? I don't know. Maybe both. But I just said thank you and put them in water. He looked disappointed. What did he expect? The final entry was from the day she left. Grandma asked why I seemed different. I couldn't tell her the truth. How do you explain that your husband has made you afraid of your own emotions? That you've learned to perform a version of yourself that won't trigger his anger? She held my hand and said, I didn't seem happy. I wanted to sob in her arms like I did when I was little. Instead, I smiled and changed the subject. I'm tired of pretending, but I don't know how to stop. I closed the journal, my vision blurring, but I refused to let the tears fall. What right did I have to cry when I'd stolen that from her? Over the next weeks, I threw myself into therapy. Dr. Powell helped me recognize patterns I'd learned from my parents, the toxic beliefs about emotions and control I'd internalized. We worked through my anger, my need to dominate situations, my fear of vulnerability. Your wife's emotions triggered something in you, Dr. Powell observed. What do you think that was? Fear, I admitted. Fear of being manipulated like my father was. But was your father actually being manipulated? Or was he simply faced with his wife's genuine emotions and didn't know how to handle them? The question haunted me. I called my father, something I rarely did. We talked about Mom, about their marriage, about the crying I'd witnessed as a child. I thought she was trying to control me, he said quietly, making me feel guilty with her tears. It took me years to realize she was just hurting, and I was too proud to comfort her. By then, it was too late. She'd learned to hide everything from me, like Sarah had learned to hide from me. I started writing her letters, pouring out everything I couldn't say in person. Apologies, revelations from therapy, promises to change. I didn't send them. They sat in a drawer, unsent messages to a woman who'd become a ghost to save herself from me. 1 month turned into 2. Sarah remained at Linda's. We communicated through brief texts about bills and household necessities. I learned from mutual friends that she was doing better, laughing again, crying at movies with Linda, being herself, just not around me. I came home one evening to find her in the apartment, collecting more of her things. She startled when she saw me, like a deer caught in headlights. "I thought you'd be at work," she said. "I left early. How are you?" "Fine." She resumed packing, folding clothes with mechanical precision. "Your grandmother? Recovering well. She's in physical therapy now." "That's good." Silence stretched between us. I watched her pack, noting the careful way she avoided meeting my eyes. "I miss you," I said finally. Her hands stilled. "Mark, I know you need space. I'm respecting that. But I need you to know that I miss you. The real you. The one who cries at commercials and tells exaggerated stories and feels everything so deeply." She looked at me then, really looked at me. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Sarah in her eyes. Then it was gone, shuttered behind the walls she'd built. "I can't be her with you anymore," she said quietly. "Every time I start to feel something, I hear your voice calling me manipulative. I see your hand raised. I remember the disgust in your eyes. I'm working on changing. I know. Linda told me you're in therapy. I'm glad. But some things can't be undone, Mark. You can't unring a bell." She zipped the bag closed and headed for the door. I wanted to stop her, to beg her to stay, but I forced myself to remain still. I'd taken enough choices from her already. "Sarah," I called as she reached the door. "For what it's worth, you were never manipulative. Not once. Every tear was real, every emotion genuine. I was the problem, not you. I see that now." She paused, her back to me. "I know that. I've always known that. The question is whether knowing it is enough." She left without another word. I stood in our apartment, surrounded by the evidence of our life together, wondering if I'd ever get the chance to find out. The next day, I received divorce papers. I stared at the papers, my hands trembling as I read through the legal language. Sarah had filed for irreconcilable differences. The document felt heavier than it should, each page a weight pressing down on my chest. I called her immediately. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. Her recorded voice, cheerful and warm, mocked me from the speaker. I hung up without leaving a message. The next morning, I drove to Linda's apartment building. I'd been there once before, years ago, for a birthday party. The doorman recognized me, but his expression hardened when I asked to be buzzed up. "I'll need to call up first," he said, reaching for the phone. I waited in the lobby, watching residents come and go. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the doorman hung up and shook his head. "She's not accepting visitors." I left, my feet heavy on the pavement. At a nearby coffee shop, I sat with an untouched latte, staring at the divorce papers I'd brought with me. A lawyer's business card was clipped to the front page. Sarah had already retained counsel. That afternoon, I made my own appointment with a divorce attorney. The office smelled like leather and disappointment. The lawyer, a woman named Catherine, reviewed the papers with clinical detachment. "Your wife isn't asking for much," she observed. "Just an equitable division of assets and for you to cover her legal fees." "I don't want a divorce," I said. Catherine set down the papers. "That's not really your choice anymore. She's filed. You can contest it, drag it out, make it messy, or you can accept it and try to move forward." I thought about Sarah, about the woman who used to cry at dog food commercials, who used to light up when telling her embellished stories. Then I thought about the hollow shell I'd created, the ghost who moved through our apartment with mechanical precision. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Catherine walked me through the process. Mediation, asset division, paperwork, timeline, the business of ending a marriage reduced to bullet points and filing fees. I signed where she indicated, my signature shaky. As I left her office, my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Thank you for not making this difficult." I wanted to respond, to pour out everything I felt. Instead, I typed back, "Of course." The mediation was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I spent those weeks in a haze, going through the motions of daily life, work, therapy, sleep, repeat. Dr. Powell pushed me to examine my patterns more deeply. "You keep saying you want Sarah back," she noted during one session. "But which Sarah? The one who expressed herself freely, or the one who learned to hide from you? The real one, the one I fell in love with. And if she came back tomorrow, cried at a commercial, would you truly be okay with that? Or would part of you still see manipulation?" I wanted to say yes immediately, but the question lodged in my throat. Would I? Or would I always be watching, waiting for the tears to turn into weapons? The day of mediation arrived gray and drizzling, fitting weather for dividing a life. I arrived early at the mediator's office, a neutral beige space designed to minimize conflict. Sarah arrived exactly on time, Linda by her side for support. She looked different. Not the robotic version I'd created, but not quite the old Sarah either. There was a steadiness to her now, a quiet strength. She nodded at me politely before taking her seat across the table. The mediator, a soft-spoken man named David, guided us through the process. The apartment would be sold, proceeds split, the furniture divided based on who bought what. The car was mine, the good china hers, our life reduced to a spreadsheet. "What about the photo albums?" Sarah asked quietly. "You can have them," I said immediately. She shook her head. "We should each take the ones from before we met, the ones from our marriage." She paused, her voice catching slightly. We can make copies, split them. Even now, she was being fair, more fair than I deserved. The session continued for 2 hours. We agreed on everything without argument. When it ended, Sarah stood quickly, gathering her papers. Linda waited by the door. Sarah, I called as she turned to leave. She paused but didn't turn around. I'm sorry for everything. Her shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. I know you are, Mark, but sorry doesn't undo the damage. She left with Linda, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. I sat in the mediator's office for another 10 minutes, staring at the dissolution of my marriage in black and white. The apartment felt even emptier when I returned. I started packing that night, dividing our possessions according to the agreement. Each item held a memory. The blender we'd received as a wedding gift, the throw pillows Sarah had picked out when we first moved in, the bookshelf I'd built badly, which she'd laughed about but kept anyway. My phone rang as I was wrapping dishes in newspaper. It was my father. Ben told me what's happening, he said without preamble. News travels fast. Mark, I need to tell you something. About your mother and me. I sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes and broken dreams. What about you? I drove her away, just like you're doing to Sarah. I made her afraid to feel anything around me. By the time I realized what I'd done, she'd built walls so high I couldn't climb them. But Mom was manipulative, I protested weakly. No, son. She was human. She felt things deeply and expressed them openly. I was the one who couldn't handle it. I was the one who made her feel like her emotions were weapons instead of just emotions. The parallel hit me like a physical blow. Did she leave you? She stayed, but she was never really there again, just going through the motions. I lived with a ghost for 20 years before she finally asked for a divorce. Don't make my mistakes, Mark. It's too late. She's already filed. Then learn from it. Don't carry this poison into your next relationship. After we hung up, I continued packing, my father's words echoing in my mind. I found one of Sarah's books wedged behind the nightstand, a romance novel with a cracked spine from multiple readings. She must have hidden it there, reading it when I wasn't home. 2 days later, I got a call from Jessica. She was hesitant at first, clearly torn between loyalties. I probably shouldn't tell you this, she began. Then don't, I said, though I desperately wanted to hear whatever she had to say. Sarah's in the hospital. My blood ran cold. What happened? She collapsed at work, exhaustion and dehydration. She's okay, Jessica added quickly, but Linda thought you should know. I was in my car before Jessica finished talking. At the hospital, I found Linda in the waiting room. She looked up when I entered, her expression unreadable. You came, she said. Of course I came. How is she? Resting. The doctors say she'll be fine. She just hasn't been taking care of herself. Can I see her? Linda studied me for a long moment. That's up to her. Wait here. She disappeared down the hallway. I paced the waiting room, my mind racing. When Linda returned, she nodded toward the hallway. Room 302. She'll see you. But Mark? She grabbed my arm as I passed. Don't upset her. She's been through enough. I found Sarah propped up in the hospital bed, an IV in her arm. She looked pale, fragile in a way I'd never seen before. Her eyes were closed, but they opened when I entered. Hi, I said softly. Hi. I sat in the visitor's chair, unsure what to say. Jessica called me, said you collapsed. I'm fine, just tired. Sarah, you're in the hospital. That's not fine. She turned her head away. Why are you here, Mark? Because despite everything, I still care about you. I'll always care about you. Caring isn't enough. I know. We sat in silence for a while. The steady beep of monitors filled the space between us. Finally, Sarah spoke again. I've been seeing someone too. A therapist, I mean. Dr. Lee. That's good. She says I internalized your words, made them part of my inner voice. Now when I start to cry, I hear you calling me manipulative, even when you're not there. The weight of what I'd done pressed down on me again. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I know, you've said that, but sorry doesn't make the voice go away. A nurse came in to check Sarah's vitals. I stood to leave, but Sarah stopped me. Wait, there's something else. She took a breath. I've been offered a job in Portland. My cousin runs a pediatric clinic there. She needs a nurse. Portland, clear across the country. When? Next month, after the divorce is finalized. That's great. A fresh start. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I left the hospital with a heaviness in my chest. Sarah was leaving, really leaving. Not just moving out, but putting an entire country between us. It was probably for the best, but it still hurt. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, real estate agents, and moving boxes. The apartment sold quickly, a young couple eager to start their life together in the space where ours had ended. I found a small rental across town, far from the memories. Sarah and I met once more to sign the final papers. She looked healthier, a hint of color back in her cheeks. We sat in Catherine's office, signing our names over and over, each signature another nail in the coffin of our marriage. That's it, Catherine said when we finished. The decree will be final in 30 days. We walked out together, stopping on the sidewalk outside the building. The sun was shining, birds singing, the world continuing on as if nothing had changed. I hope you find happiness in Portland, I said. I hope you find peace, Mark. I really do. She turned to go, then stopped. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you remember our wedding day? When I cried during the vows? Of course. You wiped my tears with your thumb, smiled at me like they were precious. What happened to that man? I had no answer. That man had gotten lost somewhere, buried under fear and toxic beliefs. By the time I'd found him again, it was too late. Sarah walked away, her steps sure and steady. I watched until she turned the corner, then I walked in the opposite direction. The moving truck came the following week. I supervised as they loaded my boxes, half of what used to be ours. The apartment echoed with emptiness when they finished. I did a final walkthrough, checking closets and cabinets. In the bathroom, I found it. Sarah's wedding ring, sitting on the counter where she'd left it months ago. I picked it up, the metal warm in my palm. Such a small thing to represent such a large promise. A promise I'd broken. I pocketed the ring and left the apartment for the last time. The new couple would move in tomorrow, fill the space with their own dreams and hopes. Maybe they'd do better than we had. My new apartment was smaller but sufficient. I unpacked slowly, creating a space that was just mine. No memories lurking in corners, no ghosts hiding in closets, just empty rooms waiting to be filled with whatever came next. On what would have been our anniversary, I got a text from Sarah. Just 2 words. Safe travels. She was leaving for Portland, starting her new life. I stared at the text for a long time before responding, "Be happy." 3 dots appeared, showing she was typing. They disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. Whatever she'd wanted to say, she'd decided against it. I understood. Some things were better left unspoken. I went to therapy that afternoon. Dr. Powell asked about my goals moving forward. I want to be better, I said. Not for Sarah, not to win anyone back. Just better. That's a good start, she said. It was a start, not an ending, not really. Just a point where one story stopped and another began. I thought about Sarah on a plane to Portland, flying toward her new life. I hoped she'd cry at the in-flight movie if it was sad. I hoped she'd tell exaggerated stories to her new co-workers. I hoped she'd find someone who saw her tears as the gift they were. As for me, I had work to do. Years of learned behavior to unlearn, toxic patterns to break. It wouldn't be easy or quick, but maybe someday I'd be the kind of man who could love someone's whole heart, tears and all. The sun set outside my window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere, Sarah was watching the same sunset from 30,000 feet up. We were under the same sky but living in different worlds now. That's how it had to be. I unpacked another box, slowly building my new life one item at a time. Tomorrow would come with its own challenges. Next month, next year, they'd all arrive in their turn. But tonight, I sat in my empty apartment, finally understanding the weight of what I'd lost and the work required to never lose it again. My phone buzzed. A message from Ben, checking in, then one from my father. Life moving forward, relationships continuing, just without the one that had mattered most. I responded to their messages, made plans for dinner later in the week. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, I continued unpacking, each box a step toward whatever came next. Not a happy ending or a sad one, just an ending. Sometimes that's all we get, and sometimes that's enough. The divorce papers sat on my kitchen counter, official and final. I filed them away in a folder marked important documents. Just another piece of paperwork now, nothing more. The real weight was in what they represented, what they'd cost us both, but that was done now. The story of Mark and Sarah, husband and wife, was over. Whatever came next would be a different story entirely. I turned off the lights and headed to bed in my new apartment, ready or not for tomorrow.